Welcome to Jammin' with Jason Mefford, a show where we discuss topics relevant to chief audit executives and professionals in audit, risk, and compliance. We discuss the technical and soft skills needed to navigate the minefields of organizations. You hear best practices and practical advice for helping you advance your career, and we'll even talk about music, mindfulness, and psychology, because we can. So sit back and relax while you listen to the #1 podcast in the world for internal auditors, unscripted and unedited. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Jammin' with Jason. Hey, today I have my friend Danny Goldberg on with me, and we are going to talk about a very non-technical but soft skill that we all need. And it's around having better people-centric skills. So Danny, welcome on. How you doing, man?
Jason, I'm fantastic. It's great to join you.
Well, it's you wrote this book, People-Centric Skills, and I know it's been out for a while, right? I think it was 2014 or something like that when it came out, right?
Correct.
So maybe just give everybody who's listening just a little background on you and kind of why you wrote the book, why you thought this was important, and why this is something that internal auditors need.
So getting into training now, we've been in training full time. We just hit our 10-year anniversary last May. And through just that progression into the profession and up the corporate ladder to a chief audit executive, my main focus was always, I want great, technical skills are important, but I started to realize as I climbed the ladder, the communication skills are so much more important than those technical skills, because in many respects, as auditors, we already have 2 strikes against us, or at least a strike against us. People just don't like us on face value. We've got to make some extra effort to build those relationships, build those rapport, build the trust that's necessary to be a successful auditor. So when we went the training route, I was always interested in writing. I helped out on a best practices internal audit book probably about 8-9 years ago. I was professional commentator on it, and through that, and writing articles, I really loved just writing in general, and I kept on looking out in the market. And Jason, you probably see this. There is not much on the market on best practices on communication skills for internal auditors, business, finance professionals, and so when we approached Wiley, Manny Rosenfeld and I, who has retired, but we still keep in touch, great guy. We approached them, and they were ecstatic. They were like, yeah, that's a great idea. You can find topics like interviewing or very specific topics on communication, conflict resolution, but not just general. Here's how to communicate well, and here's some good topics to consider. So we went that route, and the first book's been very successful. Great reviews. We've sold, and from what I understand, an inordinate amount of copies compared to other internal audit type books, from what I've been told. So we've done really well there. And over the last few years, we've been talking to Wiley because the book is fictional in nature. It's a storybook format with a character that's an executive coach / trainer that goes around to clients and deals with different situations. It's funny because I've been criticized in that regard because the storyline is the main character is based on me, but people are like, oh, that's kind of a bit of an egomaniac. And what's funny is Manny is the one that came up with that idea. That was not my intention whatsoever, but he said, man, you've got a built-in storyline here. I mean, you meet all kinds of people, you're in different scenarios, different situations on a day-to-day basis. Why not capture that? And he was right. It made for very easy writing and very easy storyline. So it's a fictional book, very easy to read. I've been told you can read the whole book in about 6 hours. It summarizes some of the key things to consider in the beginning and the end of each chapter. And we wanted to carry forward a lot of these same characters from the previous book to this book. And this time around, Wiley thought it was a good time to do that follow-up. And so I finished writing it at the end of the year, December 31st. And we're hoping the follow-up is going to be by April. That's kind of the goal to be published. So we'll see. We really haven't given a publication date, and we did carry forward the characters, but again, completely different skills, completely different storyline.
Well, and so this is one of those things too, where it's not like, a lot of times when a book comes out in a second edition, it's pretty much everything's the same and maybe there's a chapter that's different.
Yeah.
This is like a completely different thing, right? So you can go out, get the first edition right now, read it. The second edition is almost going to be like reading a new novel, right? Because it's a lot of the same stuff, but it's same characters, but it's a completely different book.
It is exactly like reading a follow-up novel. And, you compare it to, let's say, a technical book like Sawyer's, which is a great book. But when they update that, they're updating key aspects from an industry standpoint and things that have changed to our profession. This book is entirely new, entirely different topics. So yes, you can take that first book and you can read them independently, but you could carry forward the stories and the characters into new storylines in the second edition.
Okay. Well, and I think that's great because it's that sort of a book is easier for people to kind of get through too, right? But you're still teaching them, what needs to happen. It's funny because you were saying about people. There's always haters out there.
Yes.
And unless you've written a book or created content, you in my opinion, don't have a whole lot to stand on, right? Because again, people are going to say, "Oh, you're an egomaniac." Well, you know what? Every author that I know that is worth their salt, all of their work is somewhat autobiographical because we write from our experience. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you an egomaniac. It means you're just trying to share your story or share a story to be able to help people.
And honestly, Jason, I don't think you can make up most of these stories. Some of them are so ridiculous. You only could experience them, quite frankly.
Yeah, a lot of times truth is stranger than fiction, right? It sure is. Yeah, I know when I've done a lot of training with people, I'll give them hypothetical examples, right? But they're not really hypothetical. They're things I experienced. But it's like you would never think. You'd be like, somebody really did that. Yeah, somebody really did that.
Exact same. And when Manny actually, when we were first writing the first edition, he was looking for a job, and I talked to a few CEs, and they said they were interested, but Manny's the one that said, let's do this. This is going to be fun, and he stuck with it. And we both kind of brainstormed that we like the technical books, but this is not a criticism of Sawyer's or any other technical book, but you don't read those front page to back page. You don't read them cover to cover. You read the sections that are relevant to you, take out what you need, and move on. We wanted a book that people can read, relate to, almost be empathetic with, and still get a lot out of. And I think we've been able to accomplish that.
Well, yeah, and I think that's where those kind of books actually can have a bigger transformation on people than the technical.
Yeah,
and just like you said at the beginning, I mean, we've both been in this industry for a long time, right? We've both lost a lot of hair over time, but it's I've come to that same conclusion that you did, is that I think so much of the time and so much of what is out there is technical in nature. And it's good to have the technical, but if you don't have those soft skills, there comes a point in your career, and it's usually around the manager level.
Yes.
When it really becomes a disadvantage to you. And I'm starting to use the analogy of, it's like you're showing up and your other peers in the organization, they've been learning how to be an executive. They've been learning the communication skills, the persuasion, the influence. They've been taught that. They have coaches, they have other people who are helping them. And so when you get to that point and you're trying to compete, if you will, if we kind of use a sports analogy, with others in your organization who have these soft skills and you don't, you're going to get your butt kicked every time. And until we, as a profession, really kind of wake up and start learning this, we're always going to be playing at a disadvantage. We're always going to be the underdog.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the profession feel that, nobody really respects me. Well, they don't respect you because you're not performing at the level that you should be, right? And it's interesting too, because what you brought up, a lot of times when we say soft skills, people think communication, report writing, interviewing skills. That's where they go to. And again, that's part of it, but that's not really kind of what we're talking about, right?
That's so much more. And to your point on the manager levels, people get promoted for the wrong reasons. People get promoted for their technical abilities, but do they ask the question, can I lead? Can I get the best out of others? And that's the question. So, we dabble a lot in recruiting, and that's the kind of thing that we're looking for managers and directors. Yes, you've got to have the technical capabilities, but by the time you get to that level, that I don't want to say it becomes irrelevant, but it's not as relevant as it is when you're coming up the ranks. As a director, I need those technical skills, but I need so much more than that. And to your point, the profession as a whole, if you look at any survey from any of the industry experts, they all say critical thinking, communication, or soft skills. Number one and two skills that we look for, but they're not recruited for a lot because, well, I don't know if I can answer that question right now because that doesn't make sense, because I think those are the things you should be looking for. I can find the technical abilities, but what makes you different? How can you communicate those technical skills? That's what.
Well, and the further you get up in the organization, I mean, I was a chief audit executive 2 times. My day had nothing to do with the technical, right? It was about influencing. It was about, trying to navigate whatever political landmines the other executives were throwing my way. It was, about leading the team and doing other stuff. It wasn't, even though I was very technical, I've got lots of certifications, that didn't help me in that role, right? Because I wasn't the one actually out doing the audits. I was doing everything else. And that's why, like you said, I think it's around the manager time when, if you're not getting or learning some of these soft skills and starting to, master them, it's going to be hard for you in your career.
Yeah, agree.
And so let's talk about, because again, people-centric skills. What are some of the skills that people, in our profession need to start focusing more on? What are some of these areas, and what are maybe kind of some quick things? Because this is, we'll try to give some tips, but this is a long-term process. So you're not just going to listen to today's podcast and magically, you're a Jedi in soft skills. Nope. But what can we get people to start getting them down that route?
So in the first book, I think we covered a lot of, I would say, somewhat basic skills: conflict resolution, teamwork, team building. We kind of touched on body language, a lot of things that we kind of touched on. But this book, I kind of wanted to do something a little more in depth. One of the skills that I like focusing on, that I've continually tried to get better at on a day-to-day basis, is emotional intelligence. Is understanding really where drive and what are your hot buttons, and how to push people and yourself in the right direction, and keeping them away from the wrong direction, and understanding self-awareness and empathy. And again, the impact you have on people is significant without you really realizing it a lot of times. So we have a long discussion in the book, a long chapter on emotional intelligence, what it is, how to use it, and how to become more effective at being emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, because that's that's actually an area that's kind of been a hot button for me too. And the reason is because with a lot of things, a lot of people are using the word emotional intelligence now.
Yeah.
But a lot of people still don't really understand what it is. And when you go back and you actually look at the origins of it, the couple of scientific stuff that was written to begin with, before we really got the book on emotional intelligence, right? That it depends on who you're talking to. There's either 4 or 5 pillars, but 3 to 4 of them are about yourself. It's about understanding your own emotions, being able to control your own emotions. It's only the 5th one that's actually about other people.
Yeah.
Right. But I think a lot of times people go into this almost thinking like emotional intelligence is some way to manipulate or force people, to do what you're doing. Or it's like, I want my boss to learn about emotional intelligence because he's an asshole, and kind of thing. And it's like, well, you're kind of going about this the wrong way, guys.
And specifically with emotional intelligence, a lot of that, how you treat others and how you handle situations is self-driven. Meaning, if you don't understand yourself, I always tell people, if you don't love yourself, how could you love another person? If you don't understand yourself, and you have good self-awareness and understand what drives you from an emotional standpoint, how can you understand and empathize with others? I don't think you can. And thus is why, to your point, you got to get to know yourself better than you can even in order to lead people effectively.
Yeah. Well, and the whole idea to realize too, and this is probably even harder for our profession than maybe some other areas, right? Because if for example you get somebody who goes into human resources, well, they're probably going to be more empathetic anyway because they're kind of drawn to that
Yeah.
profession. They're much more right brained and feeling kind of a thing. The people that tend to gravitate to internal audit, risk, compliance, very analytical, left brain kind of people.
Yeah.
And we like to believe that, well, emotion doesn't really matter. It's the data. It's the you know, it's the facts that we see. It's what we prove. But it's like, but again, people don't understand, and that's why, for 20 plus years I've been studying psychology. 80% of what you do is all emotion. 80% of all decisions that are made is emotion.
Yeah.
It's like, because people get so frustrated, for example, when they, for example, create some sort of a, ROI calculation or trying to prove a business case. And they've got all these numbers and everything looks amazing. And look at this ROI. And they go and present it to somebody and they get turned down. And they're like, well, why was that? The numbers say we're supposed to do it. And it's like, that executive was not looking at the numbers when they made the decision, folks. It was based on emotion, and it was based on how well you were able to communicate. It almost doesn't matter what the numbers are.
Yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. And um, uh, to your point, man, emotion drives a lot, and it's ironic because I focus when I do my internal audit classes on factually based conclusions at all times.
Mm-hmm.
But the ironic thing is, as an industry, we use a lot of emotional terms in the reports that we write, and so I think that really hinders good understanding, good communication of finding. One of my favorite words, actually one of my least favorite words, is adequate versus inadequate. You see those in audit reports all the time, and inadequate is an awful, awful term. That's a very emotional term to say, even if you're talking about their inadequate control structure. But what I think people don't realize is people read this from a personal standpoint. I mean, you're talking about their process if it's one of your clients.
Yeah.
If you're saying their process is inadequate, their controls are inadequate, you're saying they're inadequate. I think that's really failing. I joke around with people. I'm an inadequate father. I'm an inadequate man. That's a horrible, horrible term, quite frankly. And it's, again, much worse than failure, but we throw it around willy-nilly all the time because that's kind of one of our industry terms that, to that point, if you're emotionally intelligent as an auditor, you're not going to describe something, in my opinion, as inadequate. I like staying very simple. I like sticking with, in its simplest form, when we're talking about controls based on internal audit testing, controls did not mitigate the risk to an acceptable level. A little more wordy, but at least it's saying exactly what I want it to say, and it can't be misinterpreted.
Well, it takes the emotional charge out of it, right? Because again, like you said, if we were talking, as two friends, and maybe let's say, I noticed you were doing something that you could improve upon,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah, would I walk up to you and go, Danny, you really are an inadequate father? It's like, no, dude, maybe, you could consider doing this, with your kid instead, right? I mean, we wouldn't, as human beings, say some of these things to people that we know. So why are we saying them in the audit report? And
Them
part of it
fighting
is,
words right there, man.
yeah, they are fighting words. Well, and then what's funny, right, is that we're so offended, right, that manager would take offense to
I
that.
know. I know.
Well, if you tell somebody they're inadequate, they're going to take offense to it, right? And if you don't believe us, well, try it, right? Go to your significant other and say, honey, you're inadequate, and see how they respond.
Well, and to that point too, when we talk about this in class, because this is honestly one of my hot button issues, people always say, well, people understand the term. It's like, yes, people understand the term because they've heard it, they understand the context. Take someone that's not been audited, take a new VP that's coming into the organization, and you say that to them. Will the reaction be the same? And that's what you've got to ask yourself. Why continue to do something that's not good practice just because it's been accepted?
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things that's just carried over as a tradition.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of words that we use in our profession have a very distinct meaning for us, but to other people, they understand those words completely different. And so again, we can go one of two ways, right? We can educate people as to what the word really means, or we can actually just use a word that most people are already comfortable with and
Yeah,
quit using the stupid archaic words that we're using.
that's
I
kind of,
think the latter's the better.
yeah, no, and I talk about using big language too a lot of times. The term always pops in my head is penultimate. Penultimate is one of those words where I know what it means. 85% of people don't, and the only reason I know is because I've seen it in print a couple times. Penultimate means second to final, the draft before the final. Should you ever use that in a report? No, because people won't fully understand it. Use the simple words. And that's exactly what we're talking about, but from an emotional standpoint. Use the simpler words where people can understand. We're not trying to confuse people. We're trying to make them understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I know, some of the things that we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, and obviously that is an area, that we need to get better at. So go buy a book, go take a training course, do something, but come on folks, we got to get more emotionally intelligent. But and some of the other ones, I mean, conflict resolution, well, that makes sense, right? I mean, we realize that a lot of times uh, we're going to be put in a conflict type of a situation. We have to somehow negotiate or come to some sort of compromise. And so that kind of makes sense, right? But even still, I think that that that's one that I think sometimes we get a little self-righteous about,
Yeah.
in thinking that we can't compromise or else we will no longer be independent or objective.
Yeah. Let's,
And that self-righteousness, I'll let you talk to that a little bit because I see you're kind of
and again, we haven't talked much, but I know we have a lot of the same beliefs. Conflict resolution is that's actually part of our first book. In this book, we go into making sure that you communicate in the right mode of communication to minimize conflict and minimize misunderstanding. But to your point on independence and objectivity, people throw that independence wand around a lot because, quite frankly, I think they don't want to do something. They want to stay in their box, and we've got to be flexible. I was never too concerned. And again, it's based on your industry. But when I was chief auditor, I was never concerned about my independence. I was concerned about doing what's right from an organizational and an audit committee standpoint. And objectively, I mean, it's not that we were going to purposely do something wrong. It was just, if we need to impair our independence to help out on this project and then have to outsource the auditing, so be it. But that's for what's best for the company. And
Mhm.
this is something, and Jason, I don't know if you focus on this, but I love talking about the definition of internal auditing because people forget that our goal is to help the organization achieve its objectives. Always. That's the
Ding,
number
ding,
one
ding,
goal.
ding, ding, ding.
But
We
when
forget that.
90% of auditors forget that question.
Yeah.
They don't know the answer. They say value added, and they use all this auditor terms. It's like, no, we're here to help them achieve their objectives. We might go about it a different way, but we're not there to hinder their success. And until you prove that to them,
Yeah.
you're going to have a problem. But talk about,
Well,
go ahead, please.
oh, I was going to say, yeah, but I know people get very concerned when we talk like this, right?
Mhm.
So I was coaching a chief audit executive just this last week, and we were kind of talking about this, and I was asking some questions about, well, do you really think that's the highest risk area in your company? And so we were talking about this whole idea again of kind of this independence, and well, and the point was, well, but if I do that, how is that going to show up in my QAR? Am I going to pass my QAR? And I said, well, I don't know. But if you don't, I think that would be a pretty easy discussion to have with your executives in your audit committee. Hey, I didn't pass my QAR because I actually helped out and did something that was in the best interest of the company instead of following the standards over here. I think they're going to be pretty understanding of that, when you've got that right attitude of helping the company meet its objectives and doing what we need to do to help with that. Yeah, and this isn't going down like being unethical or any kind of stuff like that.
No
But
doubt.
if you can't dot the I or cross the T's on everything, it's probably okay. Do what's right for your company, and everything else is going to work out.
Transparency and continuous communication. That's what I hark upon our industry all the time. I hark upon every industry, but specifically to this, if I have an independence issue, I'm going to be transparent about it. We're going to make sure people know about it. We're going to make sure the board and the audit committee know that we're doing this and they're okay with that approach. And if you're doing that, everything to your point is going to fall into place. So 100% agree with you there.
No, because it was, even before the standard got changed to where now the chief audit executive can have other responsibilities. It's like, okay, 20 years ago, I was risk officer and ethics and compliance person as well, right?
Yeah.
But my board knew that. My executives knew that. We talked about it. And again, they said, we'd rather have you doing it than not have it.
Yeah.
And we realize you can't audit those areas. If we feel like we need to, we'll bring in somebody from the outside. It's okay. This works for us.
Yeah.
So I would have been really silly at that point to stand up and go, no, audit committee, I don't want to take on that additional role, that you think I should. Or when my CEO says, Jason, you're now our compliance officer as well, to say, oh, no, Rick, I cannot do that because that would be an independence issue. It's like, okay, well, let me just explain, right? Transparency. This is what it means, right? And so I'm not going to be auditing that particular area. It's okay. I'm going to set up my department this way. And he's like, cool, let's do it.
Yeah. It would be short-sighted from a company perspective. It would be short-sighted from a career perspective as well. So we go into a lot of things on, again, conflict management, but really it's making sure that you choose the right form of communication, because in today's highly technologically savvy environment, people default to the wrong communication method quite a bit, and that actually causes the conflict more than anything else. So we've got a lot of dialogue on that specifically. I've got a chapter on influencing change throughout any business, how to effectively influence change, not from a technical standpoint, but from a how do you communicate effectively to gain people's trust and to, again, influence that decision making, which to me is one of the key skills of internal audit and, quite frankly, any business professional.
It is.
We also go into coaching and mentoring because, again, from a leadership standpoint, you've got to be able to handle some of these difficult situations with your team and get the best out of them. And the last 3 or 4 chapters are all about, and to me, this is such a key skill, presenting your PowerPoint presentation, whatever, public speaking, presenting, and body language. And not just being able to read people's body language, but understanding what body language, what message you're giving off to people. I am far from a body language expert, but over the last 10 years, I've picked up a lot, and I'm pretty comfortable that I can read most people. And if I can do it, and that's kind of my pitch to most people, if I can do it, anybody else can do it, just by picking up on little cues that people give off and looking at the full gesture cluster versus one piece of it. And going back to public speaking and presentation skills, Jason, I don't know if you felt like this, but when I first started doing this for a living, I loved it. It was perfect for me. I loved doing it. A lot of people don't feel that way. But what people have to realize, if you can't get in front of an audience and really own the room, own the audience, and give a good, confident, clear message, your career will be stymied by that, period.
Oh, it will be.
Got to get confident or good at it as soon as possible.
Well, and the problem is, they do different surveys about, what people are most scared of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been ironic because I've heard this. I mean, we've been in the speaking business for a long time. And so, I've heard this from several of the oldies in the profession, that have kind of mentored me along. And it's like, people are more afraid of public speaking than they are afraid of death.
Yes.
And that's kind of crazy, right? Especially when, again, as you get to that manager, director, CAE level, most of your day is going to be in kind of a speaking role. And you have to get used to it. You have to learn how to do it. And kind of the follow-up on that, like you said, is it's not your PowerPoint, and it's not even the words. It's some of the words, and how you string them together, obviously from a craft. But I remembered a study I think UCLA did about communication, and their number came in that the actual verbal or what's said is only about 7 to 10% of the message.
Yeah.
90% of what's actually communicated is all nonverbal communication. It's the rapport that you build. It's the way you're standing. It's the way you're presenting your voice. It's all of these other things. And if we're going to be successful, we have to learn what those things are, or else we're going to get clobbered, when you get up in front of people. And it ends up being kind of like, I mean, we both attended lots of conferences, and most of the people that are giving speeches are reading from the slides, and it's like a boring lecture kind of thing. That is not what we're talking about. That's why you fall asleep in those sessions.
and you know what? That's one of the reasons why I think it was pretty easy for me to break into this profession, because again, it feels natural. I think in our book, I came across, what did I call it? There was a movie, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, like a long time ago. I said, How to lose an audience in 2 minutes. And I hit the top 10 reasons why people lose an audience in 2 minutes. And to your point, standing behind the podium, reading your slides, not having good voice inflection, not having good tone. These are things that are very easy to pick up on, but people aren't good at them. And again, just those little tweaks here and there can make you, at the very least, a competent presenter. You don't have to be a great world, and I always tell people, be yourself. If you're an introvert, you can be a good introverted presenter. Don't start trying to be outgoing. Don't try to tell a lot of jokes when you're not a funny person. It doesn't feel natural. You can do something well and still be yourself. And I think, to me, that's a key point that people need to realize. Once they realize it, I think a lot of that fear, to a certain extent, tends to go away, because they have no confidence they'll be effective as a presenter because of their personality.
Well, and for anybody that might feel that way, I'll let them in on a little secret too. Is some of the best speakers, comedians, actors in the world, people that you would look at, you see their body of work, and you think, wow, they're killing it. They're introverts.
Are you an introvert?
I am.
So I lean INTJ, and people are always shocked by that.
Absolutely. Nope, I'm an INTJ too.
There you go. Yeah, I'm barely leaning that way, but I always tell people it takes effort to teach an 8-hour course. I've got to turn it on, and then I shut it down at night, and I like being alone. I like just it takes a lot of effort. And for people that are natural extroverts, this is their personality. It's not an issue. But for someone like yourself or me, it takes some effort. I love it, but it's not easy to do.
Yeah. So if you're an introvert, don't think you can't do this, because like I said, literally you'd be floored to find out who some of these people are. And you're like, really? They're an introvert? Yeah. Serious introvert. Okay. So I know, and just like everything, we get to talking and we kind of bump up on time already. So I think we're going to have to talk again, because it's, you and I are on so much of the same page in a lot of ways. And, but I wanted to at least kind of get something out there for people to start thinking about, go out, get Danny's first book. The second one's going to be coming out, in a few months, so you can get the second one. But like you said, it's kind of like reading, a series of novels. So you're going to get something from both of them. It's not just a repeat of the first book. So make sure and go out and get that. We'll try to leave a, link to that in the show notes. And I think before we got on, you said something too about that you're going to be getting some hard copies of this new book too, and people will be able to get an autographed copy directly from you.
Yeah, if you reach out to me specifically, I will devalue the copy of this book and
by defacing it with your autograph.
By definitely defacing it. And I'd be happy to get you one, because I definitely appreciate the feedback. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me after the fact and give us very candid feedback. And I think what you'll see in this book, and what you saw in the first one, if you read it, is you're going to see a real life picture. And I would say a lot of emotion. And people that know me can relate to a lot of these stories. And people that don't, I think it'll open you up to some new potential things or some new skills that you might want to focus on to further your career.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is probably a good episode too that people may want to go back and listen to again, because like I said, we talked about a lot of stuff. I'll try to give a little summarization, but we talked about, emotional intelligence, understanding body language, conflict resolution, being careful about some of the terms that we use and the language that we're actually using, the mode of communication, which again, like you said, this is a huge issue. People send a text message or an email for something that should have been done in person and then wonder why they have this issue, right? Transparency, communication, influence, which I like to talk a lot about too, because again, I think people don't really understand, and it's been scientifically proven what the 6 different things are that you need to do, or now a 7th, because Bob added a 7th one to it with persuasion. But it's scientifically proven what you need to do to be able to influence people. And then, again, some stuff around public speaking. So, for you to start just kind of thinking about what are some of these people-centric soft skills that you need to start developing, and just pick one and start getting help. Go buy a book, go to a training, do something so that you can start improving yourself.
And to that point, Jason, what I would say is, I like your point, pick one and focus on it. Do something, maybe even simpler. Give a short 2-minute presentation and videotape it, and get some self-awareness on who you are and how you come across in front of a group. A lot of people tell me there's not a lot of value to that. Every time I've done that, and I am in front of groups all the time, every time I see myself on camera, I adjust something moving forward. Mm-hmm. It's unnerving to see. It's kind of like hearing your voice on a voicemail. You hate it, but it's something that everybody should do every few years, quite frankly. And to me, that's the simplest thing without spending much money you could do. And if you're honest with yourself, you'll see some things that you're going to want to change.
Yeah. Well, and it's easy now too with the technology. Most people have a camera on their phone, on their laptop. Just turn it on and talk to yourself. Nobody else is going to see it.
Exactly.
But like you said, this is and I know a lot of people try to poo-poo it, but again, from all my mentors in public speaking, and these are like, heavyweight world-class champions, every one of them has told me to do the same thing too. Yep. So, just do it, even though it feels a little weird. Because if you're serious about wanting to improve, it's going to take some time. You're going to have to do some things. This is a long-term process, but if you don't start and at least start doing one thing, you're never going to get there. So
can't agree more, man.
Well, hey, Danny, it was great having you on. Now, if people want to connect with you, where's the best place for them to actually connect with you at?
You can go to my website, Gold, S as in Sam, R as in Ricky, D as in David.com, Gold SRD, Gold Standard in Training. You can email me at dgoldberg@goldsrd.com, or just go to LinkedIn and put in Danny M. Goldberg, and I will pop up pretty quickly. I'd love to connect with anybody that could be interested in furthering their skills.
Yeah. Well, and again, like I said, thanks for coming on today and taking the time, and I'm sure we're going to have some future episodes as well, because we got to have you back, man.
I would like that. I would like that a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, everybody, go out, have a great rest of your day, and start figuring out how you can improve your skills in these soft skills areas. And really, it'll have a huge, huge impact on your career. So with that, we're going to sign off now, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Jammin' with Jason. And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you later on the next show. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy at ondemand.criskacademy.com. And that's C as in the letter C, riskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you also will have access to the video version of today's show. The views and opinions expressed on this show are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.